This is the Page Publishing Book Club. How you doing? I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. Can you imagine a child being taken from their family in order to better assimilate into a white society? It happened to Native Americans and to Indigenous children in Australia. Meet an artist who developed a technique to survive the abuse she suffered and create a life dedicated to helping other victims in her book, A Place Called Home.
My name is Carmel Middletent. I live in 29 Palms, California. I write books and I paint the Australian Aboriginal art. I'm an Indigenous artist. Because I'm a survivor of intergenerational trauma, growing up being abused in foster care and institutions, and I wanted to share my story about what it was like, some of the better stories growing up in out-of-home care, but also for other survivors who suffered the trauma of being abused as these children growing up in foster homes and institutions. Some of us made it, some of us didn't. And my book is about surviving the trauma and how I developed a technique as a young girl. And I wanted to share that with other people because I believe it was my coping technique that helped me survive intergenerational trauma growing up in foster care and institutions. Intergenerational trauma is Indigenous people that have been separated from their families and didn't know their families, and due to government policies back then. And there was also forced adoptions, and their carers were supposed to have given them protection and love, and instead they were abused and neglected, and some of us died and some of us made it. That began back in 1950 and up until 1975, and there was around 250,000 children that were illegally, forcibly removed from the mothers. It was to assimilate the full-blood Aboriginal people and have them grow up in a white society away from their full-blood Indigenous families so they could fit into a white society. My mother is full-blood Aboriginal, and my father, originally his family is from Austria. So there's different organisations called the Stolen Generation, the Forgotten Australian Generation, and Former Child Migrants. And there was a national apology from the Australian Prime Minister at the time, Mr. Kevin Rudd, who apologised to these different organisations and redress also for the abuse and neglect. So it's, intergenerational trauma is also like the Jewish people also, that's intergenerational trauma, something that happens over and over again in a family. And so I'm a voice for other survivors of intergenerational trauma, and I share what helped me back then and even today, because for me it's been an ongoing, process of healing from intergenerational trauma, and I just want to let other survivors know that through hope and using my technique that I was able to still love and be able to share the story, but also I'd like to inspire other survivors to be able to write and tell their stories, because I feel it's part of their healing journey also, which I believe is very helpful and has helped me. So I would love for people, if they would like to read my book and read a little bit about my coping technique, which has helped me throughout my life. People would call it meditation technique. And when I was a little girl, I would suffer a lot. I'd feel hungry and very cold from the weather because not having, any food or enough warm clothing at the time, I endured a lot of pain. And I remember feeling this, it's like you're half awake and half asleep when you're suffering so much pain like that and for so long. And I drift into like a state of meditation, and I had this wonderful experience where I felt the divine touch the top of my head, and a feeling of love and a very powerful feeling of love came right over me and made me feel better. And I continued this technique all throughout my life. And, some other things that I experienced also was to love the people to keep on loving them and be nice to the people that were abusive to me. And that has helped me throughout my life. And I was also able to change my life around and become an Aboriginal artist through a mentor of mine, and be able to write this book today, because it's been a lifelong journey of healing, and I feel that it's the same for other survivors of intergenerational trauma that have suffered the child abuse and forced adoptions.
You're really an inspiration, Carmel. Thank you. Jorge Sosa was born in Cuba, grew up in Miami, went to medical school in Tampa, became a surgeon, and now he's found another calling. He's a writer.
It's an interesting story. So basically, I started telling stories on my son when we would take road trips. So right around he was 5 or 6, he would like tell me a story because he'd be bored in the car. So I'd make up, some fantasy story about some of my favorite Viking stories and Saxons, and it just became like a family habit. And after about a year and a half or two, my wife goes, you should just write all these stories about the wolves and the bears and the Vikings. And I was like, it's a great idea. So I kind of made it a hobby and started writing. So I'm a bit of a, historian, amateur historian. And I think one of the things that interested us, always really interested me the most, was the interaction between the French and the English. But I decided to, throw in the Vikings, which is, much more exciting. So I looked at right around the year 1066, and that's the seminal year in what I'm hoping is going to be a 3 to 5 book series. So I'm leading up to that in the first book. And I went into the historical interaction of the Normans, the Saxons, the Scandinavians. And England was just like this mixing pot of everything. But the fascinating thing is, if you trace history, what happened in England around that time really set European history for the next many centuries. The rivalry that developed between the English and the French as a result of the Normans invading England and William the Conqueror really reverberated, throughout centuries, probably even up to the Napoleonic War, that tension between England and France. And that was very, very influenced by the Vikings. So I took that historical position and I said, okay, can I build a historical fantasy around it, a fiction? And that's what I did. The story is basically a Norman child whose family, they end up in Saxon England. And I made the child very smart, very gifted, picked up reading and writing very easily. So at that time, obviously, somebody with that kind of talent, they would send him to the church. So he gets sent to a monastery to finish his education. And accidentally, by happenstance, ends up meeting what would have been a former pagan Viking who has turned to religion. And throughout the story, we come to know why he turned to the Catholic faith, because at that point, everybody's Catholic. And he kind of takes this kid under his wing and starts teaching him a lot of, Viking warrior skills that no child that's going to grow up in the church and become a member of the church and of the clergy needs. But the kid finds himself much more attractive. And early in the book, he says, I want to be a warrior. I don't want to do, work for the church. And it comes to a culmination when there's a Viking raid. And basically, this guy who's a former warrior defends the kid and saves the kid's life, and kind of parlays that into the Vikings taking the kid back with them. And so he grows up and he becomes a man in a pagan Viking stead. And he, like most converts, takes to it with fervently. He becomes a true pagan and, grows into becoming a warrior. And so I build the story towards his coming of age. He's becoming a Viking leader. He goes on a couple of raids. He obviously has to take vengeance on someone. And so it's, in my mind, it's the first book in a series that's going to lead up to the year 1066, when two major battles happen in England with 3 different armies. And it sets European history for the next few hundred years.
This is some undertaking from a full-time doctor.
Yeah, I was like, but I mean, a lot of my friends play golf and, I had a lot of spare time. And I love telling the stories to my son. So I just kept making it up. And then I started doing the hard research. And then I was like, this is a great way to retire. This is going to be my second career. Honestly, I wrote this book for my son, for myself, and I wanted it, published. Not so much, honestly. I don't I'm not looking for making a lot of sales. I just wanted, to put it in and begin what I hope is a 10, 15-year course of writing this saga that's in my head. And
Wow.
then obviously I told my son is 11. I told him, you're not allowed to read it yet. You have to wait till you're 17 because it's rated PG-17. It's
Oh,
about Vikings.
yeah, those Vikings, they were crazy.
Yeah, they were,
Raping and pillaging all over the place.
Yeah, it's a little too violent for an 11-year-old, but he's
Yeah.
like, my experience with Page was awesome because they made it all very easy, very straightforward, and I got the product in my hand, and I'm like, yes.
Nice, Jorge. We try. Thank you. Nathan Hatchey is becoming a regular on the Page Publishing Book Club. This guy, I'm telling you, he does it all. He's a YouTuber, runs an apparel company, he's a consultant, and a writer who's published his third book. It is entitled The Come Up.
The come up inspiration was my family always called me by the name Mr. Magoo as a child because I was just young, naive, passive, didn't really stood up for myself. The come up was also to reference leveling up in your life. It doesn't necessarily mean I have a big bank account, which, hey, that is a part of your come up. It's just you went from point A to point B. You leveled up, whether it be financially, spiritually, physically, or I did mention financially. So the come up, it was more of a personal growth journey for me. And I unveil everything. It's my most vulnerable book. Talk about a marriage, a challenging marriage, the death of my father, going from one career to another by a leap of faith, which turned out to be a financial blessing in disguise because I thought it was a sales job, but it turned into a whole lot more than that. But sometimes it's not what you earn, it's what you keep. And with a bad partner, it was hard to keep any money in the house. So had to go through a divorce. Then that was troublesome because, she's not working. She lost her job. And then going through court with the custody battle. She wants spousal support. She wants child support. It was just a mess. And then I talk about how I got closer with God. I started going to church and I just started getting favored with that and put my trust in God because you can only do so much as man. And I go into detail with that in the book, how after that, I started experiencing more blessings and new avenues and new things. And it's just how I leveled up with adversity and obstacles and using my personal experiences for other people's inspiration.
Now you've got your YouTube channel. Is that how you're promoting this book?
Yep. I have a website, promote it there. YouTube channel, I promote all my books there. Whenever I conversate with people, the books are on the table. Or if I do a Zoom call, the books are on display in the background. Instagram, promote it through Instagram. My email list, I promote it through there. So I've been building an email list for the past 7 months. So it's like when people sign up, they're skeptical. They see a few of your emails. And it takes people, I've been noticing, about 5 to 8 to 9 times after they see your emails. Then they're like, okay, now I'll buy your books. I trust you. You're giving me value with your emails. I'll buy your book. I always put my email link in the bio where I talk about, God comes first. I use personal development and back it up with scripture and how we deal with life's tough moments, whether it be how to have faith when this happens or how to deal when things are not going your way. What does it mean when one door closes and another door opens? And then talk about sometimes not all storms in your life is not necessarily to disrupt your life. Sometimes it could put you on a path to a new direction that is meant for your life.
And then you keep sending them stuff and eventually they buy your book.
Exactly. Once a week, I send like a short 200-300 word email just about positivity, inspiration, motivation, and using my personal experience with it. And then some people forward it. Some people, the word travels. I mean, when I first started the email list in April this year, and I posted on Instagram, only 2 people signed up. And then eventually the next one, it was like 3 people. The next one, it was like, okay, a couple more signed up. And then before you know it, like, a couple here, a couple there, sometimes even 10 in a single day will sign up through word of mouth.
Wow. It all adds up, right? Thanks for the insight, Nathan. We'll talk to you when your next book comes out. All right, we're taking a quick break. We'll be right back. This is the Page Publishing Book Club.
Have you written a book and want to get it published? Then now's the time to call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099 and do it immediately. You see, they're looking for authors of all types of books. And unlike most publishers, Page Publishing will take the time to review most of the books submitted to them. And and they'll even give you their feedback. And if they like what they read, Page Publishing will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, the Apple iTunes Store, and other outlets. They'll handle everything: copyright protection, printing, cover art, publicity, and editing. So if you've written a novel, a children's book, a cookbook, inspirational work, a book of poetry, or biography, and want to get it published, then you need to call Page Publishing and do it immediately. Call 800-204-6099 now for your free author submission kit. Your road to fame and fortune could very well start with this simple phone call. For your free author submission kit, call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099.
Okay, we are back on the Page Publishing Book Club. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. Robert V. Angel Little's dad wanted to write a book about how his family came to America to escape communism. He never got the chance, but his son did. It's entitled Innocence Lost.
Yes, it is a true story. My book is about what took place in my home country during communism, along with my life and adventures. I am the main protagonist of the whole story. I was elected to become the school leader and to lead the masses of pioneers or students between 5th grade and 8th grade. And afterwards, after I took my admissions test, the high school of my choice, I came into open conflict with the elite forces of the Secret Service.
What do you mean by that?
The Secret Service was persecuting basically everybody who had anything to do with freedoms, political jokes, or just anything that it wasn't construed to be part of the school curriculum.
And this was in Bucharest, Romania in 1989.
Actually, the conflicts with the Secret Service started in October of 1988, and they just kept on going like that up until me and some of my high school comrades were kicked out from high school by October of 1989.
So they kicked you out of school, and what did you do?
Well, they kicked us out of the school because we had connections to the West. See, there was a law, part of the 1984 Romanian Constitution, that stated, and I quote, "Whoever has connections to the West is bound to lose their secondary education, and they're also bound to lose their state jobs." My father used to work at the airport for about 20-something years, and he also got kicked out of there because Mom was in the United States at the time. After the expulsion from both the National Guard and high school, I basically just stayed home and tried to learn English and wait for the passports to come.
How old were you when you came to the United States?
I was 15 years, 7 months, and 1 day old. The plot of the story can be construed as a cause and effect scenario. I mean, I was trying to write it from the educational point of view, but also try to make a political statement. I mean, besides the fact that readers can learn a few things from my past experiences and the life was, they should also take in consideration and or put into balance what's going on throughout the United States today. I mean, we were living, in oppressed society, and we tried to get free from it. In the United States today, you also see the Black Lives Matter movement, and they're trying to coordinate that with civil rights movements. But also, because the book was mainly, based on education in the beginning, I wanted to send a message that if there is a way to change, the educational system, huge reforms need to be done.
Well, that's an understatement.
I've spoken in the past with the governor of Wisconsin about education. One of them was Scott Walker, and the other one is Tony Evers. I've had conversations with both as far as the educational system, the way it goes into the United States, putting it into perspective of what I was taught.
Right.
And obviously, I went to high school in the United States, and I've seen that without any equivocation and without trying to insult anybody, I am sorry to say, but the educational system in the United States is way low. A lot of people that I talk with, I ask them if they're avid readers or if they like to read or if they would be interested to learn something. Matter of fact, I spoke with politicians. I spoke with security enforcement officers, sheriffs, police officers. A guy pulled me over, and he said, "Yeah, I will buy your book. I will buy, no problem there."
Oh, good for you, Robert. Thank you. How about some bedtime stories for mature adults? Leo James was inspired by his mom to write a book full of rhymes entitled Bedtime Story Rhymes and Assorted Tales for the Elderly.
Pretty much this book came about because my mother is blind, and she was always asking me for stories because she can't see to read or watch TV. So I wrote them pretty much for my mother. Just lighthearted tales. Kind of a lot of them have to deal with little animal characters and dealing with their nature like humankind. It's a little mixture of all kinds of things in there. One short rhyme that goes like this. There was a little girl named Pearl who had a little dog by the name of Earl. Now Pearl and Earl walked the block, and every few feet Earl would stop and sniff at a spot on the sidewalk. Well, Pearl would give the leash a tug, but still little Earl would barely budge. Then little Pearl gave a great yank. The leash snapped, she fell back, and down to the ground on her bottom she sank. Well, the dog ran away and never came back. Next time, said Pearl, I'll ask for a cat.
That's cute.
There are a total of 36 in the book. There are something like, I think, 21 rhymes and 15 short stories.
You want to share one more with us?
Okay, let me see here. This one's a good one, I think. Let me see this one. This is Gus and his bottle of wine. Once upon a time, there was a man named Gus who had a bottle of wine he kept on a shelf untouched. For years and years it sat right there, collecting dust. Why don't you drink it? Everyone asked. Because, said Gus, I don't have a glass. You don't have a glass? Then use a cup. I guess I could do that, said Gus. So then he got a cup and opened the bottle up. But as soon as he began to pour, there was a sudden knock upon the door. Well, Gus looked up and dropped the cup, and both on the floor. Both of them broke, and poor Gus swore. Then as he stepped towards the door, a piece of glass got stuck in his foot, and Gus cussed some more. And whoever had been knocking heard the curses fly. So they turned and started walking, and left his house behind. Well, Gus gave a great sigh, shook his head, then cleaned up the mess, and went straight to bed.
Nice work, Leo.
Okay,
You read very well. You have a very nice voice.
thank you.
Are you going to keep writing?
I'm writing another book right now, but I have hundreds of books, countless books that I've written and saved over the years. But books of this nature, I probably have about 100 more books full of tales like this, and I have hundreds more of all different kinds of writings and tales.
Well, sounds like you'll be busy, Leo.
Yes.
All right. Always an avid reader, Angelica Legacy believes the more you read, the better you'll write. This Brooklyn girl loves writing poetry and fantasy, and now she's published her first book. It's entitled Vampire Lover.
I wanted to make something different that involves people of color. Normally, you see when they're in a fiction, movie, book, whatever, they're portrayed as witches or whatever the case may be. So I wanted something different to make black vampires and a female main character as well.
Why aren't there any black vampires? Why?
Exactly. And if you do enough research, vampires are mentioned in almost every culture. I wanted to switch it up and be as different as possible to catch the eye of whoever I could. It's about a young girl who is given a responsibility passed down from generation to generation, and she's a vampire slayer. Somewhere down the line, she finds herself in love with a vampire. She doesn't know that he's a vampire at first, but he falls in love with one and then finds herself in love with another as well. And they fight over her, and she has to choose between tradition is one male and one female that's fighting over her.
Oh.
And one name is Lorcan and the other one name is Callie.
Which one does she want?
I can't tell that one. You gotta read to find out.
So they're fighting over her.
Yes.
Why can't you have both of them?
That's being greedy, don't you think?
Okay. She's supposed to be killing them because they're both vampires.
Exactly.
Ah, all right. So what do? Do they go out on dates? What do? She's got to wait till they wake up at night.
So I guess I could give another spoiler. One that she doesn't know is a vampire is actually a daywalker. So that's how he's able to trick her. That's how she doesn't know. So I actually have a 7-book series for this, but only the first book is out right now.
So you're turning the tables on Twilight, aren't you?
Just a little bit. I do the usual social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I try to post as much as possible. But I'd have my own custom hats with the book's name on it and stuff like that. One says my name shortened, like as I would write my signature on a signed book, A Legacy. And the other one just says Vampire Lover.
All right, so look for the hat that says Vampire Lover. I'm going to do that. All right, Angelica, thank you. And thanks to all of our authors who joined us tonight. An excellent group as always. Head to 710WOR.com if you missed anything or if you want to share the podcast. We love it when you do that. Thanks for being with us. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. Catch you next time on the Page Publishing Book Club.